Okay. He brings the car.
He brings the carp, and I look at it, and the carp is jumping, and I said, I'm not going to touch it. This is not for me. I am afraid. Take this carp. He said, are you crazy? I'm going to give away the carp. When did you eat the carp? I said, what am I going to do? And I went to this Mrs. Wagner, because I knew she's on all the... I said, Mrs. Wagner, my husband brought a live carp. What am I going to do with it? He says, don't you worry, I will tell you what to do. I told my husband to bring the carp. I wouldn't touch it to Mrs. Wagner. She, of course, she knew what to do with it. She gave it a bang in the head, and the carp was dead. And she cleaned it and wiped it, and then she cooked it. And I said, Mrs. Wagner, you take off whatever you want for you and your husband. We'll have it Friday night. And that's what we had. And I learned to bake challah. In Salzburg, I baked challis. After a while, I baked, and I knew how to make the breads, to break the challah.
Yeah.
And that was such a, and we didn't tell anybody, because everybody would want to come and eat the carp, and this was not a big carp. And this we ate, nobody knew. It was like something unbelievable. We didn't eat carp for years already. We didn't know what is it. We knew because in Poland we ate a lot of carp, especially Friday night, everybody ate carp. So that was such a unbelievable, and we never forgot this. And later on, when we were already older, do you remember Mrs. Wagner's carp, the live carp? That was a real experience. And then I learned to bake challis. When I was married, my husband, we had some people who came in, so my husband said, put up some water for tea. I put up water, and he says, it's already half an hour, the water is not cooked. So he said to me, I said, you go, you see, I can't, I don't know. He goes, there is no water anymore. The shining is on, the kettle is almost brown, burning because there was no water. This was the first day that I learned how to cook, to do everything.
Now, a couple more questions. Did there come a point in time, if you can remember, where you went from being a survivor to knowing that you were free? When was it?
Free when we left Salzburg.
So it wasn't until Salzburg.
Because from Salzburg, we couldn't go any place, like we could only go to Linz. We had to be in the same country. So there was a camp in Linz, and there I found a family. Actually, this was a cousin to my mother. They were also an older couple. So I went to Linz, or we could go to another little place, but we couldn't. We could go to Vienna, but we couldn't leave Linz. We didn't have any papers. We first, in Salzburg, we started to get papers.
But
everybody, and not only this, we got German papers. I have a paper from Salzburg that my husband, a Schlosser means who makes locks, a locksmith, and I was a modistin. Modistin is somebody who makes ladies' hats. I have this from Salzburg. I can show you this if you are
Yes.
interested.
Before the papers, did there come a point where, not because of the papers, but where your mind felt the war is over?
Where the war was over for us when we had a little food.
Did you know the war was over?
Yes, we knew the first.
You. You personally, where you knew it's over and I'm safe.
Well, we knew that we are free because they opened the camps and the Russians came in. That's we knew where we are free. But the point was, and that's what I wrote about, I was free. But I ran back into the camp because where could I go? I don't have a mother, I don't have a father, I don't have a country. So what good is being free? That was when we knew we are free. But the worst thing was, what do you do with this freedom?
Okay, then I'll ask you a different question. When did you feel that you were starting to rebuild your life?
When I was married,
Okay.
yeah.
Now, besides, did your husband work in the DP camp? Did you work in the DP camp? I'm talking about Salzburg.
Yeah. Well, he was a little bit in the board because the camp had people who were working. Everybody did something, to keep the camp going. What's his name? Kruger was the main. He was the chairman, so to say. He was very good. Actually, he didn't want to bring, when we came, our group came, he didn't want to let us into the camp because and my husband always said, even when they were,
Good friend.
when they were eating and sitting and eating, I remember you didn't let us in, didn't want to let us in. And the reason was, there was no place. There was no place to sleep. There was no place, there was no accommodation.
Oh.
There was no place. But after a while, he took us in, and it took time till we got a place to sleep, and you can take the people in, but you have to know whether you'll be able to put them up, give them food, whatever it is, But they got also from camp. The Austrians were very much afraid of the survivors. They were all, the Germans too, right after the war. They were very much afraid. They were thinking that now we will take guns and we'll kill them out, kill them off, all of them. But unfortunately, we are Jews, we are not used to those things. Even if we have, the first that taught us were the Israelis. We didn't, to fight, to kill people, it was not a Jewish thing. We didn't know even how to fight for ourselves. We just didn't know how. First of all, we didn't have weapons. We never, who had in large weapons? Nobody. A Polish policeman, a soldier, but private people had, unless they were afraid of something, but nobody had weapons. We didn't know about it.
So in Austria, if they were afraid of you, how did it show?
So there were places in the Austrian government where you have to go and say how many people you have, and they right away they gave you food cards. They gave you, because without a food card you couldn't get food. You had to have a card. Like during the war they gave you for sugar or for bread. That's what we got. For so many people, but we always said more because they didn't come to count.
Right.
But they knew that there was a lot of survivors.
Right.
So they gave provisions, and we even in the beginning we set one long table, and we were all sitting and eating. It was not private. But later on, when we had those little homes,
Right.
it was because there were single couples or single people living in one house. Then we were already a little bit more settled.
But
And
it
I
was
started to write candles on Friday. And everything that I remembered that we couldn't do much because we didn't have much.
But you were a pretty self-sufficient community in Salzburg.
What?
It was a very self-sufficient community.
In Salzburg?
Yeah.
Yes.
You
Yes.
had your there.
Yes.
There were
Yes.
people were running businesses.
My husband too.
There was also black market,
Yeah. The flea market. The flea market.
not
is it?
flea market, black market.
Yeah. Yeah.
What did? Excuse me.
And you know, my husband, he said, he was an entrepreneur, and he said that we have to have a little bit more because we cannot always depend on others. So he went down and he didn't know English, but he said, watch. He knew watch, and he said hour. So the guy told him 1, 2. You, me, watch. You, the money that was the soldiers' money. No, you, because there was this money that the soldiers said, what is it? Me, you, German money. And he said yes, because he went to the DP, he went to the PX, and for this money he could get 3 watches. And this is how it started.
So, you're friendly with the Klugers.
Yeah.
You were friendly with the Wagners.
Yeah, we were at each other's bar mitzvahs and weddings.
Okay. And did everybody prepare their own food?
Yeah.
You didn't eat together. You all prepared your own food separately.
When we are in those little houses, everybody, the women especially, when they were with the men, we cooked for each other.
If something had to get done, you did it as a group
Yeah,
in Salzburg?
yeah.
If you had to make a little hospital, what happened?
Everything.
So you did everything together as a group?
Yes, yeah.
Okay. Did you all know each other by the end?
Of course.
Okay.
We had Himmelfahrt, now I remember, the couple Himmelfahrt. She's still my friend in Israel.
Who's that?
Fela Himmelfahrt. The Klugers know her too. This is from Salzburg.
Okay. Did anybody have to go back and participate in the Dachau trials or the Nuremberg trials?
My husband was at the trial of a guy who was in his camp. But that was in Germany, in a small city. And at that point, the Germans were already fed up with the trials. And this was not a long story. This was not, he was not one that you have to hang, you know. So he was at the, I don't even remember, this was a small place and we were scared. Oh, we couldn't wait to get out of there.
What year was this?
Hmm?
What year?
What year? We were still in Europe. Must be 47. Yeah.
In Salzburg, in terms of the conversations, did you talk a lot about the camps, the war?
Of course.
Is that
But only about themselves. You see, speaking about the camps and here in America or Canada or never, we never spoke about this, and we were very, we didn't like when people asked us. This was such a pain that this was like a new wound that doesn't heal. And we didn't want to speak about it. This was our faith and our our sorrow, and we don't want to talk. Because first of all, when you start to speak about it, even now, I get so excited. You know, it's like remembering something. If you remember something good, you of course you smile and it's wonderful and it's a pleasure. But if you start talking about the Holocaust, it's not a pleasure. So right after the war, you see, nobody was writing about it. The historians didn't write about it. Later on, when the people were settled, when they all of a sudden have children, when they understood that we have to speak about it for the sake of the future generation, of the children, they will grow up, they will know nothing about it. That is when the people started to write, the books came out, the historian gave books, and that's where we started to talk.
But in the DP camps, no?
No.
So what?
No, in the DK camp also, but only between each other.
What
As
were?
a matter of fact, every simcha was finished on the subject of camps. Why? Oh, you know who was here? Moshe. Moshe was here. I was with him in camp. I knew his mother. You tell me what Moshe is here. Where is he? And like somebody would say, you know, today is the day when they killed them in this camp. And no matter what, every simcha was finished on the subject of camps, but only between each other.
That's what I mean.
Not
So your conversations naturally went to that topic.
yes.
Because that's how you referenced each
Right.
other. Okay.
But
Did
we
you
also
talk
trust
about-
each other.
Right. Did you talk about where you were going to go after Salzburg?
So later on, when we were in Salzburg, Bricha came to Salzburg, and they started to take young men. They started to smuggle them through Vienna and Italy. But it was a very not only hard, but it was a dangerous trip. But somehow they smuggled, and they wanted young people they didn't want right away couples. They didn't want to have people that had already children, because there were couples who had children in Salzburg. So we couldn't go because we were waiting. That is the time when the Bricha came that we started to hear about Israel. That Israel is fighting. Israel was already had so much trouble with the Arabs before that, you know, and they needed people. And the young people went, and they really was fighting very gallantly in all the wars for the independence of Israel.
Were they able to get them through?
Yes, they did, but it was and not only this, from Italy, they used to go by boat, and the boats were not even seaworthy. This is all in that book too. The boat was not, some of them capsized, some people died on the route to Israel.
Did you?
But that was Palestine yet. That was,
Right,
Israel was not on the
Right.
map yet.
This is 1947.
Yeah.
Would you hear about survivors who made it to Israel?
Yes. Later on, letters came coming from those that were lucky enough to get to Israel.
But would some of you be discussing the idea of going to America?
Yes, everybody, because otherwise everybody would go to Israel. But because it was such a terrible, England didn't want to let the survivors in because the Arabs didn't want it. And the Arabs, England was always with the Arabs, because of the oil. So they made so hard for people to go in. and then they put everybody on Cyprus. 52,000 people went on Cyprus and lived in terrible conditions. And they wanted to go to Palestine, but they didn't want to let them go.
Okay, now I'm going to step back. Did you help prepare food for anybody's wedding?
What?
In Salzburg, did you help prepare food for anybody's
There
wedding?
wasn't much food to prepare.
Okay, so it was mostly cans.
It was cans.
Okay.
Whatever was in the cans.
Okay, and there was no wine or anything
No,
like
we
that?
didn't have it.
Okay. Who made, like, the chuppahs for these weddings? Was it always the same, the chuppah?
Yes, always the same, mostly.
And who made the dresses? Was there any special dress?
Dressing.
The dress for the women?
I had a white skirt, a white blouse and a white skirt. And a lot of girls were wearing it to their chuppah.
Same thing.
Same
and
thing.
hairpiece? Nothing's... And the men?
No.
What would they wear?
They had nothing. They had a kippah.
That's it? Okay.
They
And
didn't have even a suit that you consider a suit.
was there dancing or music?
No, this was done in a room.
Oh, okay,
It was done in one room and people were standing and they were glad when they got a little peaches and something else.
Okay.
Later on was a little bit more food, but in the beginning, that's what we got, peaches and
peaches.
pears.
Okay. Let me see. Would you say it was a big celebration when somebody got married?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yes. It was a big celebration.
How so?
That was the beginning of life. And when a child was born, don't ask.
Tell me about that.
When a child was born, the whole camp was there for the bris, or whatever. And right away everybody was running. Maybe you have something to wear for a child, because there was not that you could go to the store and buy. They didn't have in stores things either, So, and they wrote right away to America, or they asked the rabbi should, intercede.
So was it a bigger celebration?
Very, very.
When a child was born?
I cannot begin to tell you. The child was the rebirth of our lives.
So a lot of children were born.
In our camp, not so many. Not in Salzburg. Later on, it's in the other big camps in Germany, yes, but not in our camp.
So there was a big celebration.
Yeah.
Now, did you know people in other DP camps that you visited, like in Linz?
Yes, in Linz, yes. I told you I found a
You
couple.
found one cousin?
Yeah.
Okay. It didn't, when children were born, whether it was a boy or a girl, there was same celebration.
Same thing.
I asked you about work and making money. Now, did you ever try to go to Palestine?
We couldn't go. First they
My mother tried to sneak on the back of a bus, but she got sent back. Back of a pickup truck, but she was sent back. In coming, did people try to help each other to come to America, or did they just try to use Hayas or family to get to America?
No, families. You couldn't use Hayas. I mean, you have to have.
You had to have a sponsor.
Yeah, it's somebody who'll sponsor you. My husband had a first cousin, and that cousin lived in New York. And we were sitting, and we see that nobody is going, that we are not going to be able to go to Palestine. So we decided that we have to go somewhere. We cannot sit. My husband was also very impatient. He was afraid of Europe. He wanted to go to Europe if they would tell him to go to To Kalamazoo he would go to get out of Europe. He hated Europe. He was scared, you know. So he wrote to him, and sure enough, he sent us an affidavit. And with that affidavit, we were able to secure our visa. But also, in the beginning, it was very hard. But to the camp came people, Canadian people came who wanted people who were farriers. They all came to our people. So my husband said, you know what? Those are American people that wanted to bring people because the Canadian people they were very anxious to bring people because they did a big land but not enough people. So the people came and said they were farriers, they were owners of businesses, and they wanted people. My husband says to me, I am going to go to ask I tell them I am a farrier. I said, you don't know anything about it. How are you going to do it? There is a farrier. You know, somebody in our camp was a farrier. So my husband told him how you do this, how you do it, and this. He said, you'll never know. Go, I will go for you. He went, and he was a farrier. So he made what you call it when you
Like
make
an
the test.
Yes.
He made the test, and and it was okay. And right away we got the papers to Canada, but we still had papers to America. But the papers were not ready. We had to wait so we came to Montreal, and we stayed in Montreal a year and a half, and we gave our pictures, our papers, our affidavit and everything, because we wanted to emigrate to America.
When did you go to Canada?
48. Yeah.
48, and when did you go to America?
49.
Okay.
Yeah.
2 questions. As people were leaving Salzburg, did you have mixed feelings about leaving survivors to go someplace, or were you happy to just...
No, we were happy to go. Everybody wanted to go. It was something that we knew this is no life to be always... the men wanted to work, we wanted to be people who are able to make a living. We were not in a way, we were sick, but our sickness was a sickness of our past. Our past was always...
Did you want the future to start?
What?
Did you want your future to start?
Yes. We wanted to get away from Europe. This was the main thing, because then it started with Germany, with the war, with Russia. There was never peace, and the survivors wanted to say goodbye to Europe.
Did you know you would see each other again?
That what?
Did you know you would see each other again?
Well, we didn't know exactly, because we went there, and if you go to a cousin, means that you have a family, then you get such a pride and such a, But we thought, well, we'll see each other. We couldn't project so far. We always had to take a day after. Yeah, because we were not the bosses of our own lives. You understand? We are always dependent on a bureau that has to give us a paper where we can go, what we can do. You understand?
So what gave you you personally, the strength to go from a situation where you had seen, you had lost everything, you were stateless, you had,
But
you
this-
lost, in
This
other
was
words,
our hope, is to get out.
no, but
The strength to
what,
go.
what gave you the strength? Was it the future? Was it building your life? Where did the strength come from to know you had a future after seeing such a horrible past?
If I tell you that we didn't think about it, we knew that we don't have a future there, in Salzburg. But we hoped when we will go to a different country, a country that wants us, maybe life will be different.
But it
But
takes,
you know,
it takes a lot of strength
it takes
to
a lot
pick,
of
to pick yourself up, to go to a strange country, and to start over again. You had to have some strength.
But I tell you something. We were so beat. We went through such hell that nothing could be worse than that. And America was like, you tell it today, White House. I should live in the White House. You know, it seemed like the best of the best. Although my husband wanted very much to go to Israel, but he says, I don't want to go to Israel and sit in another camp, because there were so many people sitting for so many years in Cyprus. So he said, if we can get out from Europe, let's go any place that will take us. Some people went to Australia, and Australia to us was like the end of the world. We didn't hear much of Australia. Australia was not like America, that America was known before the war because there were people who were always wanted to go to America because they couldn't make a living in Europe, in Poland especially. So when they had a cousin, somebody who could bring them over, they were the happiest to go. And once they were in America, they started sending money. They started sending dollars to their families. So America had always a good name. But Australia? Who went to Australia? But there were people who went to Australia.
So you wanted to make money and rebuild a life.
No, see, making money was not the thing. We wanted to make a living, not to make money.
Gotcha.
You see, money was not something that was in our
Make a living.
in our yeah. We didn't to live, to have bread and butter as much as we want, to work, to have a decent job, to start a family. Those were our goals, not to make money, because we didn't even know what money means. Money means to me, even today, to pay for the roof over my head and to have bread. Those are two things that mean to me, even today.
Now,
So, not to make money, but once you were in the country, you worked very hard to come to a certain part in your life that you can be. You don't need for anybody. You know, the Jews didn't run to get unemployment or other, you know, to be able to do things by working hard. That's all. To form a family, to have a decent place to live, to have enough to eat. This was our goal, you know.
now, where were you when Israel got its independence?
When Israel got
When Israel became an independent state, where were you?
we were already, this was, I think, when we were already in Canada in 1948. I remember the Briha who were coming to to Salzburg. And this was the first, and then came news that the survivors, they took them to Israel, and right away they were fighting. They were even looking, the brigade was even looking for young boys, you know. So we said, the children went already fighting. We went from one war to the other. We didn't yet have the concept in what condition that Israel is. We didn't have the concept. You have to understand that all the years we didn't know what was going on in the world. We didn't read a newspaper. We didn't have a radio. So we did the concept of Israel was just that we have to go on a farm and you know, to work on the ground. That was the concept of Israel for us. Israel is not what it is today.
Okay, but on the day Israel won
I
its
want to give you lunch.
Okay, on the day Israel won its independence, where were you?
I cannot remember. Was this in Salzburg? I think that it must have been in Salzburg, or this either in Canada or in Salzburg. I remember only this day. I don't remember where I was, but I think that maybe that's true because I remember a lot of people crying and clapping hands and be so happy. Israel, now we will be able to go. And now started first the fight. Now we couldn't go to Israel.
I just wonder, do you recall there was a celebration?
Oh, people were crying. Must have been everybody was crying. Everybody was happy. Israel, now we'll go. Now, tomorrow we go to Israel.
Did people go down to the streets and celebrate?
No, everything was in the camp.
In the camp?
No, not the street.
In the camp.
The street was
So all
Austrian.
the survivors came out into the
Yeah.
camp, and
By that time we had radios already.
so it was very emotional.
Yeah, and I also remember one thing, that the Austrian radio had beautiful music, you know, Mozart and operettas and operas and everything, and we never wanted to listen to that music. We only listened to the American music. That's why we knew very much about jazz, about the first guy, what's her name? The famous people at the jazz era, because we didn't want to hear their nothing.
Okay, so you want to take a break now?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have still more?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Okay.